All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar. We are UW-Stout MOC. MOC stands for Manufacturing Outreach Center. And a snapshot of what we do, there are 9 project managers in our organization. Basically, we're solution providers. The things that you worry about on your way in Monday morning, that you might not have the bandwidth or the expertise to handle. We have 9 project managers who are there to help facilitate and offer those solutions. We work in the northwestern part of Wisconsin, and when we find that we don't have the particular skill set needed, we often partner with third parties. Um, and that is what we're going to learn a little bit about today. We're going to talk to Colleen. She is providing the content for the webinar, Look at Your Business Differently. It's often called 80/20. It's something that I've used in my past to enhance how we look at the customers we want to approach and how to approach those customers. A little bit about the MOC. We've made over $700 million in impacts since 1994, and that's really what we want to do, is make sure we're impacting all the businesses in our area, to make sure that we're bringing jobs to Wisconsin, we're keeping great jobs in Wisconsin, and we're expanding our businesses. Um, so with that, Colleen, please introduce yourself. I encourage people to ask questions throughout. We don't have to wait until the end. Just raise your hand in the chat, and Colleen is happy to take questions throughout. There is no need to wait until the end. So thank you everybody for attending, and Colleen, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. Hi, everybody. I'm Colleen Barrons. I'm the owner of CMB Advisory. I've been in management consulting for 20 years. I've been doing 80/20 for about 15 years. So, again, today we're going to be talking about 80/20. We're here for an hour. So I just asked, let's focus again. I know we have the whole internet at our fingertips on our phones, but you'll get a lot more out of it if you are able to pay attention. And this is sometimes a reminder I need for myself. So let's focus. Like Bob said, ask questions. If we can make this a discussion, it's going to go by. It's going to be a lot more fun. And, again, let's make sure that we do have fun. Life doesn't always have to be educational events. Do not have to be boring to be interesting. Do not have to be boring to teach you something. So I'm going to get a little bit more into my bio as we go. But first, we've said 80/20 a handful of times now. What is 80/20? And this is an open question if somebody would like to answer it. What is 80/20?
Wilfredo Pareto.
Yeah, yes. That handsome fella. We'll see his picture in a second. Yeah. So 80/20 is, 80% of our output comes from 20% of the input. And conversely, 20% or 80% of our input results in 20% of our output. So there's an imbalance. A few things are critically important while most things are not. Okay. In our life, there's a lot of 80/20. So, it's like you think about your closet, you have 20% of the things in your closet you wear 80% of the times. If you have this toolbox, you're probably mostly using a couple of the things most of the time. For me, jewelry, shoes, for my children, toys. It's everywhere in our lives. And in business, we have customers, products. We have employees that are much bigger producers than others. Suppliers, there's processes that really bring us a lot of benefit. When you think about call centers, there's people that are just more efficient, and inventory. There's things that we're moving way more often than we are otherwise. And the main thing that I want you guys to get out of this is that I'm not here to tell you that we're getting rid of customers and we're getting rid of products. The main lesson is going to be we're going to treat them differently. So we're going to treat the 80s and 20s differently based on the value that they bring to us and our organization. Okay. So where did 80/20 come from? From this handsome fellow, Vilfredo Pareto, in 1906, this Italian economist He felt that his hometown in Italy was screwed up, and he did a study and found that 20% of the people owned 80% of the land. And to prove that his town was screwed up, he went around and studied other towns, and he found that 20% of the people owned 80% of the land. He went on to study many other things, going to pea plants. 20% of pea plants produce 80% of the peas. And he first dubbed it the 80-20 principle, and then later dubbed it the Pareto principle. In the early 80s, ITW, Illinois Tool Works, they're a Fortune 500 company. You're always within 6 feet of an ITW product, but they're, nails and screws and stuff like that. But, also kitchen equipment, commercial food products and stuff. They were a $200 million company, and they said, we want to grow. They were struggling with growth. And they hired a CEO named John Nichols, and he said, we're going to do 80-20. On the implementation of 80-20, they had 19% compound annual return for 25 years. If you invested $10,000 in ITW in 1987, today it would be $1.2 million. Many of the executives from Illinois Tool Works have gone into other companies and brought 80-20 with them. So there's a lot of companies out there that do 80-20 today. I personally worked with several of the executives heavily involved with the creation of the 80-20 process at ITW. I've worked with over 70 organizations in a variety of industries, primarily manufacturing. I've done a lot of distribution, service, food, restaurants and food. I guess law firms, would fall under service. But I've done a lot. It works everywhere. I've trained thousands of people, and I've run hundreds of data sets. It always works. Okay. So I just want to, real quick, cover some definitions. So when I'm talking about the 80s, there's a few customers, a few products, the few things that bring us the majority of the value. That's what I call the 80s. And then the insignificant mini, the majority of the, again, customers or whatever that bring us only 20% of the value, I call those the 20s. Okay, so the definition is based off of the value they bring to us. Okay. Most of us acknowledge that, 80-20 exists, but we're constantly bombarded with 20s, and we live in a 20-80 world. If you believe every customer is a good customer and every order is a good order, then 80-20 can't help you. Again, I want you to think about your organization, again, thinking about your customers, thinking about your products, looking at these plants over here. We have an orchid, we have a cactus, and we have a dandelion. In your organization, you have orchids that they require a lot of attention from you to get the beautiful flowers at the top. You also have some cacti in your organization, and they require something, but they don't need as much attention. And there's certainly some dandelions that are sucking up resources and sucking up, your time that maybe we do need to think about getting rid of. But ultimately, again, we want to treat our customers fairly, but differently. We're still going to give the cactus water, but we're going to treat it differently than we're treating the orchid. Okay.
Hey, Colleen, I love that. That makes so much sense to me. I came from a company that had all those customers, and got to treat them fairly but differently. It's fairly is important, but
yes.
They do suck up resources as much as the other ones. So you'll get to that, I'm sure.
No, right. That's a big part of it. No, absolutely. And I think that recognizing that we're overserving our cactus customers at the expense of our orchids, and our orchids end up suffering because of it. Right. Another example that I might use in this situation is when you fly with an airlines, and if you fly all the time and you have star elite status, I'm not a person that flies that much anymore, so I don't have any status with an airline. I still get to go on the plane. I still get to where I'm going to go. They're not, poking me with sticks or anything. But if I have flown, I have a friend she's flown 2 million miles plus with United Airlines. Her and I, when we fly together, I ride her coattails, but we get to go in the lounge. she has a different 800 number to call if she has a problem than me that a human person answers. It's just different. Like it's like she gets treated differently than I do because of the value that she brings to United Airlines versus what I bring to United Airlines.
But it's fair.
Yes, it's fair. And the terms are established. So it's not nobody sitting around waiting for their stuff or, wondering why nobody's calling them back. Okay. We yearn for simplicity. But we always end up with complexity. Every customer, every product, every supplier that we add, there's a story to it. We're not intentionally adding complexity to our organizations, but when we start looking at it, it's like everything has a story, and that's how we end up with complexity. And this is where that complexity comes from. We have products, customers, suppliers. I'm not going to read this whole list, but it's just like all of these things are adding complexity to our organization. And that costs us money. Those are things that we are adding resources to. So that hidden cost of complexity, every order we take, we have to schedule it. We're tracking it, we're warehousing it. We're doing credit checks, we're going into collections for these, sometimes new small customers that maybe we had no business dealing with in the first place. We're selling to them, we're creating tooling, invoicing, there's additional accounting required. And, again, all of these things that cost and add complexity into our organization that isn't necessarily tied to the direct cost. We may have some small customer, it's like, well, we have great margins on them, but what we're not including is some of the stuff that's happening that we see here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to introduce you to the first tool. This is the quartile analysis. So this is a very, very simple analysis. And all of you can do this with your businesses when you get back. Again, don't do it now. Take your customers or products, sort them in descending order by revenue, and then just break them up into 25% buckets. So if you have 100 customers, the top 25 customers in quartile 1, next 25 quartile 2, next quartile 3, and finally quartile 4. So what percentage of sales do you think is in your company, and what I'll say is in every company that I have done this for, roughly is averaged out to? What percentage do you think the top 25% of customers and products, what percentage of sales do you think that results in? So if it was 20%, it would be 80. Ember, I see you. Sorry, go for it.
I was going to say 75%.
Okay, higher than 75. The other hint will be it's going to be higher than 80 because it's, it's not 80-20 because it's 25%. So any other guesses?
I can tell you the last organization that I ran, it was 91 point something.
Yeah. So it's 80. Typically what we see is 89. And what, it's like, again, I think that when organizations have a big box store or something, it's like if they have one big customer and then they're still serving all of the little ones, you might see 98, 99% in that top quartile. But 89% is, again, on average, what I see. 90, again, 91, it's kind of there. And then what we see is it continues to 80-20 as you go. So what we find is, the top 25% of customers and products is 89% of sales. And you can see, and again, this is obviously fictitious data, but this is not abnormal from what I see. Customer number 1 might be $1 million in sales. Customer number 25 is $1,000. There's a huge drop between these. And then again, I included this penny one because while you might say, well, no, in my business, we couldn't sell anything. There's nothing we could sell for a penny. I cannot tell you how many times that I see things that are less than $1, that is a whole customer or a whole product that we have in our roster that we sold less than $1 of. And again, it could be some sort of exchange or something like that, but that was all we did with that customer that year. Okay. So I've run this for hundreds of customers. companies and seen this consistently across the board. And again, at ITW, this was what they used as their part of their acquisition strategy. You know, just like, okay, like it's like, do we have the 89731? And what we find is that the overhead costs end up being split pretty equally amongst all 4 buckets, because we have a lot of efficiencies. We have a lot of efficiencies up here that we don't have down here. And we have a lot more volume up here than we do down here. So it ends up being split pretty evenly. In a training session, if I'm going through this, I'll often ask, what do you think the split is? And sometimes people will say, it's the inverse. It's 1, 3, 7, 89. I've never seen a company like that, but it ends up being split pretty evenly. And again, you kind of think about the process of invoicing. You might issue one invoice here for $500,000, and you are issuing, it might be, lots and lots of invoices down here because it's a lot of different customers year over year. There's always going to be an 80-20 breakdown. It's always going to look 89-731-ish. But if an organization has been 80-20, what we find is that the sales range is a lot tighter. There's a clear minimum order. So again, you're not going to see a transaction for a penny. If it's a product for a penny that's going to our #1 customer, we just send it for free. We're not issuing an invoice for 1 penny. We're not selling a product for 1 penny. We're including it with something else. We're kitting it. We find there's a clear minimum order, and there's also well-defined treatment plans for the different tiers of customers. And again, it's like we have a couple customers here at the top. Often customers number 1 and 2 are 12 to 50% of revenue, and I've seen more, but it's like those top 5 customers, again, depending on your organization, but like those are a huge amount of revenue. So we want to make sure that we're treating them differently. Those are your orchids. Does anybody have any questions on this one?
Colleen, have you ever, or how often, because I'm sure you have, how often do you come across someone that used to be an orchid but is now a dandelion, where once upon a time they said, we have this product and it's very profitable, it's in our core group, but could you do this little job for us as a favor? We know it's not in your core skill set. We know that you're probably going to lose money on it, but to take the whole package, and all of a sudden, 5 years later, it's all of the dandelion and the orchid went away. How often do you see that?
No, that definitely happens. And that's kind of, I'd almost call that an orchid in disguise, because, like mathematically they're up there, but their good business is with our competitor. And now we're getting kind of all of the junk. So much about this is being intimate with our top customers and treating them so well that we want to be their favorite supplier. And again, we're not asking to be the favorite supplier for the whole roster. We have a couple of customers that are generating a lot of revenue. And how do we make sure that we're their primary supplier? And if it's just the dandelions, that is a different strategy. And sometimes it does make sense to exit that business. There's a tool, and I don't want to get into all of this, but there's a tool too, where it's like you can zero up and you can just, if we were just running this business, is this profitable? And how can we price it? And how can we treat it differently, recognizing that this is not our core. This is not what we want to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. A question that people often ask is, Colleen, what if you're asking me to put all my eggs in one basket? And if you look at this data, if you lost that #1 customer that's $1 million, you couldn't make up for it with the bottom 75% of your customers. You couldn't. So right now, all of your eggs are in one basket with your top customers. We're just not treating them that way. Another question that people ask is, well, Colleen, we have this customer, it's like right now they're a 20, like they're nobody to us, but they're huge, like it's like they could be a potential 80. And instead of just saying, well, we can't do 80-20, because obviously, it's like we want to isolate those opportunities treat them like 80s, give them an ejection point to hit that 80 threshold. And then we can, again, we can give them the treatment that they deserve and bring them up faster to be an 80. And finally, my personal favorite is, well, Colleen, there's, some of our 80s today, they didn't start as 80s, they were smaller companies and they grew to be 80s. And, what if Steve Jobs was in his garage building a computer and we didn't make him a computer part, and now we're screwed out of, selling to Apple, supplying to Apple. And I had a company that was, they were based out of Brussels, and they were very adamant that this was true for them. So we did an analysis and we said, give us 10 years of customer data. They had 360,000 customers. And I did an analysis and I found that over 10 years, 4 customers had grown over time. They had, it's like kind of truly grown into being 80s. And for them, an 80 was $250,000. This was a big company. And, so then it was only 4 companies. So I did a little research and I found 2 of them it was just a mathematical thing. They looked like 80s the whole time. They've always been a big company. They just had been secondary supplying them until they became a primary supplier. The other 2 truly followed that model. They were professors at universities who were developing something that they patented and then brought to the marketplace, and they grew their business to have $250,000 of sale with them. So it ended up being about $500,000 of revenue. But I did another analysis. And over those 10 years, I analyzed how many of their big customers had fallen off because they were serving all of those small customers, because their on-time delivery was terrible. Their engineering backlog was insane because every single opportunity they were treating as a potential 80. And they lost $32 million of revenue because they were serving every opportunity like it had the potential to be an 80. And again, so that's where it's like, we want to treat them differently. We want to have a different system. And it's not to say, okay, you can't help the people in the labs, but it's just, these are your dedicated engineering resources. And we are not using our whole engineering, the whole fleet of our engineering team on all of these little projects because we are underserving our 80s because of it. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry. So, and then the best one of all is, well, Colleen, here's the thing. Our best customers, they want to buy low volume, our best customers, they want to buy our low volume stuff. And to keep them as a customer, we have to sell that to them. And some of our low volume customers, they want to buy the stuff that we're really good at, So then it's like, well, we can't, so we can't do 80-20. It's not going to work here. And that's where we land with the consultant's favorite tool, the quad. So here we have our customers separated. Column 1 is the 80 customers. Column 2 is the 20 customers. Row 1 is 80 products. Row 2 is 20 products. So in quad 1, we have high volume customers buying high volume products. So the 80s and the 80s. So 80% times 80%, it's 64% of your revenue. And it's the least amount of customers and the least products. Quad 2, and so we call this one the fort. You want to fortify this. You want to protect it. This is your bread and butter. Quad 2 is transactional. This is those low volume customers buying your best products, the high volume products. So it's, 20% customers times 80% products, it's 16% of revenue. This we want to make transactional. We want to make this lower touch than it is today. Again, assuming that we're treating everybody equally. We want to make this more transactional. And again, thinking about how we segment those, how I just said, with the engineering resources. We have dedicated engineering resources for the fort, and there's different engineering resources down here, and it's a much more transactional type process. Quad 3, those are high volume customers buying low volume products. again, this is to serve our best customers. So we call this the necessary evil. So it's 16% of revenue. There's, it's like, this is the quad that we'll probably address, that, strategically you address last. There's, we want to drive things towards quad one. But it's just, we don't want to tick off our best customers. There's a lot of, it's like, there's things that you can do here, but strategically this one, we kind of address last. And finally, quad four, this is where you want to start strategically. It's the low volume customers buying low volume products. So it's 4% of revenue, and it's the most customers that you have in the most products. And if you have a more custom organization, it's going to be a little bit more highly concentrated in quads 1 and 4. So it's going to be, higher in quads 1 and 4 because the product and customer are tied together, which actually does make the simplification process a little bit simpler. Okay. So I'm going to ask a question that I asked with the quartile, and I'm going to give a hint that the answer is the same. But what percentage of non-direct cost and effort goes into, or overhead cost goes into each quad? How do you think that is spread amongst the quads?
So I'll just stick my neck out there.
Thank you, Ted. I appreciate it.
It's almost equal.
Yes. Yeah, no, it is. And that's what we consistently find, is that it is equal. When the phone rings here or here, we're answering it and we're addressing it and we're issuing invoices. And again, we have a lot of efficiencies up here that we do not have, that we don't have down here. And these are new people that we've never dealt with. So again, we're chasing invoices. They're smaller transactions, and there's maybe less scheduling bananas stuff that's happening down here, but they're making up for it in finance. And what I find is that whenever I present this to an organization where somebody's like, well, I don't have anything to do with quad 4. I don't do anything there. And then the finance team's like, that's where we spend all of our time. Those are all of the invoices we're chasing. These are on auto pay. These customers pay us electronically on auto pay. These are the ones that we're doing credit checks for and all that. So if you are thinking, well, I'm not spending my time there, this is a great question to ask your departments. Like, how do you think you're spending your different departments? How do you think you're spending your time? And what we want to do is define what it is. What is this product? What are these customers? What do they look like? And how do we drive more business there? And how do we treat those differently than the rest of it? And how do we take cost away from here and give it to these customers, and because they're paying us for it today? Okay. All right. Every time I ask a question, I'm flipping my screen. All right, there we go. 25, 25, 25. So then when we look at profitability, so we have 64% of revenue, and wherever your gross margin is. So again, this would be a really fun exercise to do with your organization. Just looking at quad 1, it's 64% of your revenue. You have standard gross margin percentages that you can plug in, or you can identify what those are, and then split up the 25% overhead costs. What do you think that the profitability looks like in quad 1? And it doesn't just have to be Bob and Ted that answer. I would love to hear from any of you guys. Like, again, Bob and Ted, no pressure. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna give you the answer. Oh, Bob, it looks like you were gonna give me something. No, okay. So what we find is that 150 to 200% of your profitability is coming from quad 1. And, it's like, how do you have more than 100% of your profits? That means that you're losing it down in quad 4. And, and again, how do we deal with that? How do we make sure that we are appropriately doing this? So each quad, it's like each quad has different strategies for it. And again, quad 1, we want to secure the fort, establish the basics, ensure loyalty, create a partnership with the organization, and roll out the red carpet. You can always, again, and it goes in that order. Nobody cares if you do a, that number, a 80 customer fishing trip if you're not giving them on-time delivery. So you want to go in that order. Make sure that you're doing what you say you're going to do. Ensure loyalty, create that partnership, and then the red carpet. So I had a client that they had a pretty good red carpet program, but it was exclusively run by one person in the company. And so what we did was we created a program where it was not just that run by that one person. It was the whole organization was rallied around their number one customer that brought more than 50% of the revenue to the organization. And it ended up to not only, ensuring loyalty with that customer, it elevated the person that was able to do that. That person that owned that relationship before was able to elevate himself within the company, because now it wasn't just him day to day checking in on that customer. It was the whole organization that was making sure that his process was laid out and determined, and any new person that came to the company knew exactly how this customer was supposed to be treated. Quad 2, again, we want to make this transactional. We want to make this as low touch as possible. So here we want to focus on efficiency. So this is low volume customers buying your standard stuff, or the stuff that you do the best, the stuff you want to do. Again, we want it to be standard product, list pricing, go through distribution. E-commerce is a great tool if it makes sense for your organization, or even something as simple as, we don't sell directly to these customers. We have an inside sales group. Again, we're not seeking these customers out, but when they come to us, we treat them well. And we don't prioritize these customers over the fort. I had a client that was a distribution company. They had 62 distribution warehouses across the United States. And what we had them do was we analyzed what did they need to serve their 80s. And they found that they needed 6 warehouses to serve their 80s. And a big problem that they had was that they were always moving material from one warehouse to another, because to sell to their 80s, they needed volume, and the volume was in smaller buckets across the US. So they only needed 6. And they said, well, here's the problem, that we have these windows that people will go to the window at the distribution center and they will physically go and buy their stuff. And so we said, okay, well, is this for your 80s or is this for your 20s? And we found that it was for their 20s. And the model had been set up before overnight shipping was available. So in a universe where overnight shipping is available, we do not need to have 62 warehouses. They needed 6. So that was something that we were able to do to, again, secure the fort and make the Quad 2 more transactional. Quad 3, we call this one the necessary evil. We want to tame it. So here we want to establish terms. Again, what are the terms of, if we're engineering something brand new, what are the terms that we're doing for a high volume product versus a low volume product? If it's something that it's going to go into production and we're going to have hundreds of these a year, versus this is a single prototype that might not work out. What does that look like? Do we charge them for it? We can charge more here, longer lead times. We create programs to drive these products towards Quad 1. But we still, again, it's still an 80 customer, and we still have, the 80 red carpet for them. So we're still going to treat them well. I had a client, they made sensors for cars. They were based in Germany. So if you think about these, all of us have, not all of us, I guess, but most cars nowadays, I think probably all new cars now have this, but if your tires are low, the little light goes on that says your tire. So the sensor, they made those sensors. And with the transition to driverless cars, they were very busy, because that's all sensor technology. They were really busy with that stuff. And they had Ford calling them up and saying, hey, for the F-150, for the 2026 F-150, this is how we want to alter this technology a little bit. Can you engineer it? And Ford might also call and say, hey, we're going to do a prototype for the for the auto show, can you create this? And also a tiny customer would come along and say, hey, we have this idea and we think this could be a cool car one day. And they were a German-based company and everything just went in a queue. They just had everything in a queue. So they would be working on these small projects and the Ford F-150 would not be turned around on time and they would lose that order. So what we did was we changed the queue. We prioritized the queue based on the value that it's going to bring to the company. And again, we were still treating our the lower volume opportunities for our best customers well, but we were treating them differently. And finally, quad 4. These is the, again, this is the stuff that we really need to rationalize. This is where you want to start strategically. This is your low volume customers buying low volume product. We want to charge the most here. We want the pricing to be 15 to 20% over quad 1, the longest lead times. We want to see quad 4 churning. We don't want to add things here with the expectation that this is going to be something that we do every year. If we're adding something here, we want to get to a place where there's a strategic reason that that's either headed to quad 1 or 3. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. 1 or 2. Okay. And again, with quad 4, we want to make sure you have to cross the biggest hurdle to get something here. It's like for us to do this work, we really need to do our due diligence and make sure that this is something that's going to that's going to make strategic sense for our organization. Okay. So those are the two main tools for, again, an 80/20. This is kind of how I spend most of my time, just working through these quads and making decisions around them. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to guess no, but I'm just, I'm going to, oh, Ted.
No, I don't have any questions, but you explained it very well.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience too, so many companies spend so much time in quadrant 4.
Oh, yeah.
They're hoping for that next big customer. Is that going to happen? And then sometimes they just end up using them or using that client to supply them. And they never move to 3, 2, 1.
Yep.
So that's part of the deal. It's like you're spending all this extra time, servicing these potential clients, but are they potential? And I think that's the entry point that companies really need to evaluate. I mean, is this a fit for us? Is this going to work? Is this something that could move into, quad 1?
Yeah. No, and what I'll say, sorry, somebody said something.
No, that's it.
Oh. And a lot of times what we'll see is a client will come in with, they'll say, well, this is quad 4, but we think that there's a huge market for this. And like, we've just scratched the surface and we want to, like, it's like, we know we can do it. We know we have the skill set. And then nobody's focused on it and it just kind of dies by the wayside. And if you're doing 80/20, like, it's like 80/20 is very innovative. ITW is a very innovative company. But if you are strategic, if you are taking on a strategic opportunity, it's going to be its own business. You're going to take it, you are going to look at, it's like, okay, we're going to go after this opportunity. We have this one. We're going to see that we can make it. Who's the person that's in charge of it? Who's making sure that this is hitting the milestones that it wants to, and we have an injection point. It's like, if we're choosing to do this, we're going to invest in it. We're going to go all in. And it's not, we're throwing spaghetti at the wall and we're going to kind of see what sticks. Yeah. And I think that so many organizations, when they start out, that's how they get a lot of their customers, that it's kind of like, people come to us and, like, it's like, and we'll take their money. And then it's just like, but what got you here isn't going to be the thing that gets you there. So you want to be really intentional and strategic about taking things that are outside of what your core is, because they end up distracting from the organization.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're going to spend a lot of time and energy on those quad 4 people as
Yeah.
much as quad 1 sometimes. I mean, once you get that quad 1 in the loop and established, that's awesome. But boy, realize that you're going to spend a lot of time and effort just as much on those quad 4 people.
Yeah.
And so do we need to spend that? That's
Right. Yeah. If we're
that's
taking it on, we want to be intentional about it.
right.
If we're
Right.
choosing to take it on and we want clarity across the organization, we don't want, I think that something that's really stressful in organizations is, a salesperson goes out there and they're like, I got something, it's great. And then it's just like, oh, that's not us. And now you've discouraged the salesperson and it's just, how do we make
Right.
sure that everybody's
Yeah.
empowered with the same information and getting that down and understanding like really what it is? It's really difficult. It's hard to do. It seems, like I said at the start, it sounds really simple. It's the execution piece that becomes really difficult.
Yeah. Thank you. Very important.
So I hope I'm not alone. I think I recognize, some of this in the company that I'm currently with. But I'm not necessarily the person in that strategic, vision setting position where I could say we're going to just drop quadrant 4 altogether, right? And that might not be the right move, full stop. But that considered, what kind of support or evidence can like a middle manager, support staff member position sort of look to draw these conclusions and help, the people who are making those strategic plans see that maybe, we're wasting effort or energy. The people that are actually baking the pies can kind of see that evidence more and to present that in a way that's digestible to senior leadership.
Yes. And what I'll say is, in the next slide, I address this. It's like 80/20 is absolutely something that comes from the top. 80/20 is something that, if you don't have leaders, if your leaders are saying, go out and get small customer, like it's like, go out, get small customers, we want more and more of this. We wanted to be developing all these little products day in and day out. There's not a lot, again, if that's the strategy of the organization, if that's the plan of the company, it's like you personally can't change that. But what you have the ability to do is you now have a way of communicating and saying, listen, this past week, this past, like it's like this past month, this is how our time is being spent. And these are the customer, like it's like this customer hasn't gotten this attention or this customer hasn't done this. And again, I think that just kind of recognizing that. So here's what I'll use an example. When we think about that distribution company that I was talking about that had the 62 warehouses, that was an organization where they had hundreds of salespeople. All of them were going out and getting the little guy. They were looking for that guy that was going to walk up to the shop. And but what happened was that their on-time delivery with their best customers was terrible because they could ship out 30 small orders and be on time for 30 of them and just late on one, or they could it's like, or they could just be on time for their number one customer. And I think that that's something that we're kind of empowered. It's like, listen, I wanted to make sure that our number one customer, our number two customer, our number three customer, that they got their stuff on time because they bring us, hundreds of $1,000s a year in revenue versus these customers where this might be their only order this year, like this might be their only order this year. So I was comfortable with them being late, and I feel much more comfortable telling these sending an email to these 30 customers than I do doing this. And I think that it's a way of communication, but from the, if leadership doesn't buy into 80/20, it's like you're not going to be able to execute it in your silo. But there again, it does allow for a communication tool, and it does kind of empower decision, like a little bit of decision making when you have that power. And what I'll say is most leaders that I talk to in organizations, most of them believe they're doing some form of 80/20. They believe that they're prioritizing their top customers. Like they understand this intuitively. there is kind of, again, like there's kind of that, like, it's like, well, we need these small guys, like we kind of need this volume because these big guys are unpredictable. They do kind of understand that. I think that what's missing, the gap is sometimes that form. So I think that, again, being able to present, like being able to communicate upstream, this is what we're doing for our 80s, this is what we're doing for our 20s. And, it's like, we're going to measure on-time delivery, not by line items, but we're going to measure it by revenue, like the amount of revenue the customers bring. Because then if you're looking at the data that way, it's like, yeah, it looks like if we had 30 orders and we only got out one, that's a terrible number. I should have said 100. Let's just say we had 100 orders and we only got out one, our on-time delivery is 1%. But if that one order was $100 million and everything else was $1,000, our on-time delivery was 99.9%. And I think that those are some of the things that it's like, listen, like, it's like, this is how I'm being, it's like, this is how I'm being measured. But for the organization, it's like this, it's counterintuitive to what we wanted to what is really driving our organization.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Okay. Any other questions?
Colleen, do you have a preferred KPI to communicate that message? And if I can share one that I've used in the past, that is, because you tie it to dollars, right? You take the emotion out of it. You try to even to a point take on-time delivery out of it. Because like you said, if you ship that one to that tier 1 customer, it means a lot more than shipping 99 to that tier 4. Do you have a KPI that you would recommend that's easy to communicate?
I mean, I think that well, you want to tell me what because I was going to say, like, I feel like the growth rate, like, it's like compound annual growth rate is a good indicator of, the success of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. In the past, just for especially to spread this to shop floor people where they can stop it if they notice something coming through, sales dollars per labor hour. Don't do it by employee, don't do it by anything else, do it by labor hour.
Yes.
Because an EE can work 6 hours or they can work 12. But I think, to me, if you do that daily or even having people do it hourly, they'll start to pick out your quad 4 in a hurry, and you start talking to those people upstream and you start talking in revenue, it'll really get their attention. You take the emotion out of it, you give them cold hard facts, and it's relevant. It's, to the hour. Here's how many hours we worked on this job. Here's the sales revenue generated. Just for me, that's worked even to the shop floor level, because really you get them involved in it, and that's where it really comes together.
Yes. And I think that, and for me, it's always been, it's like, I like to, again, if we can separate things 80-20, but that's a great way of them self-selecting. And, and I'm all for, I like to have complete transparency. I don't want anybody at their job kind of being like, well, I think this is more important, but somebody might show up at my station and be like, why would you pick that one first? That's not, that customer is not important to us. So like, my goal when coming into an organization is like, let's eliminate all confusion. Again, I think that we're in a labor shortage right now. We want job satisfaction is not only good for morale and all that, but like, it's really important to watching our businesses continue to grow and retain and keep employees. Okay. So then, why isn't everybody doing 80-20? 80-20 is really counterintuitive. Again, like, we're doing less to get more. So it is a difficult concept for people to kind of, when it comes to execution, think about. Sometimes it's a lack of objective data and analysis, so again, you look at this, you look at that quartile, you look at the quad, and it's like, this should be easy. I'm going to run it on my business. But what you're going to find is that, well, it's like, well, we have all of these different customers. We have one customer, but they have 37 different ship tos. Is that one customer? Is that not? There's a lot of things that kind of, get in the way when it comes to the data. Resistance to change, simplify and change. I think that we all know what that's like. Sometimes, again, trying to eat the whole elephant by applying it to the whole business all at once and as quickly as possible, that becomes really difficult. And finally, most important, lack of top management support. 80/20 is something that starts at the top and you got to push it down because, like I said, it doesn't. If leadership believes that you need to, all of those dandelions need to be treated like orchids, you're not going to be able to execute it. And then culturally, there's, like I said, most companies that I talk to, and again, I'm probably biased because I talk to people who are interested in doing 80/20, but most people I talk to, we're already doing it. We're already doing it. Like, people do recognize it in some ways. But like I said, it's the institutionalization of it, like making sure that every single person knows why an opportunity is being prioritized over another, and people can communicate in a much more efficient way, knowing the direction of the company. My favorite, our business is different. All of you have worked in very unique and different businesses and industries. Every industry has its own, every company, every industry has its own intricacies, but nobody is that different. Nobody's that different. And it's like, then this one, again, right now with the talent shortage, my leadership team couldn't handle it. My leadership team is so busy that they couldn't handle doing this right now. And what I'd say is figuring out what they shouldn't be working on and limiting the stuff that they're doing is going to help them even more, and again, allow the organization to do a lot of the heavy strategic lifting. And again, it can't be applied here. We're too large, we're too complex. And, again, most companies think that, it's like everybody, everybody has a lot of customers, everybody has a lot of products, we're all doing a lot of different things for people. And just, I have done applied 80/20 to organizations as small as $2 million annually and as big as 26 billion. So it works everywhere. It looks different everywhere, but it looks different between those two places, but it works everywhere. Okay. And I'm just I think that I tried to go deeper into the case studies as we were going. So I was going to go through a bigger case study, but I think that I'm going to skip over that. And 80/20 is very much, a thinking process. You have to really figure out how you're going to achieve more with less. Figuring out how to move resources from low value to high value uses. Day to day, we're constantly bombarded with 20 issues, and we have to figure out how to deal with our 80s first. Complexity reduces focus, and it affects our financial results. Adding this complexity to our organization absolutely impacts our bottom line and honestly our top line as well. There's many different ways that it can be applied. Like I said, 80/20 itself is a concept, very simple. How to apply it is, it's kind of the difference between, there's the art and the science of 80/20. The science is very easy to understand, but the art can be very complex. 80/20 is a great way to differentiate yourself from your competition. If you get really intimate with your top customers, it's going to give you a leg up in your niche that you've dominated. Focuses the organization, so again, everyone in the organization on good businesses and high potential growth opportunities. And it allows you to leverage your existing overhead and improves EBITDA margins. It improves your bottom line continuously. So again, knowing that it's hard to get resources in places, how can we leverage what we already have? And again, it's like not just an overhead, but like within the plant, how can we make the most of the resources that we already have in place? Okay. So again, very simple. This was the end. Very simple concept to understand. I think that execution becomes complicated. If anybody would like my support, and just if if you want to get your customer product data and do a quick overview of 80/20, I'm happy. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to support you. I'm happy to support you through that. Okay, does anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question. It was just that low value to high value comment you made. And I think that's really important because they spend a lot of time on the low value, just as much as shown. And getting, some advice on that would be good. So, yeah,
Yeah.
very good. Thanks, Colleen.
Thanks, Ted.
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for attending. 80/20 is a very unique concept. It's very successful, and like Colleen said, a lot of bandwidth can go into this, and that's really what Colleen offers is some extra bandwidth because everybody doesn't have time to wear 6 million hats today. And having used it in my past, I can tell you, I wish I had had an impartial, non-emotional third party to help my whole organization walk through it because if you really want to see people dig trenches and get emotional about stuff, especially your salespeople, especially the top levels of the organization who have these personal connections with certain customers, try to do some 80/20 stuff.
Right. Or
That will
engineers. Yeah. Or
right.
engineers with products. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So to have a third party like Colleen who can come in and really help you wade through all that kind of stuff, put the guide rails down, bring everyone back to the center, get the emotions out of it, just talk facts, highly recommended from someone who's done it in the past. I wish I wish I would have known of a service like you when I was in industry. So highly
Yeah.
recommended.
Thanks, Bob.
And if nobody else has any questions, Colleen's information is there. If you attended today, you'll get a copy or you will be given her contact information so you can reach out. That will come from Heidi. But thank you everyone for attending today, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys next month. Thanks again, Colleen.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.